Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. US-mediated peace talks in Geneva have wrapped up amid tension, fresh Russian strikes and deep disagreement over territory. With pressure mounting from Donald Trump, we assess what the outcome means with Stefan Korshak. He's senior defense correspondent at Kyiv Post. Stefan, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So I want to kick off with a very short soundbite from President Zelenskyy, and then I'll get your take on it.
Regarding the military track, I heard progress. On the political track, there was a dialogue, and they agreed to continue. I did not hear the same level of progress there as on the military track.
All right, so it was a two-day peace conference, trilateral, held in Geneva. The second day finished very abruptly after 2 hours. And yet President Zelenskyy is saying there that there was some movement. What do you make of all this?
Well, I think that he's trying to describe stalled talks in the best way that he can under the circumstances. The word here is that there was no progress at all regarding terrain and the people living there. The Russian and Ukrainian positions are just they contradict each other. There's a huge distance between them. Also, on the military side, the speculation here is that is discussions about troops on the ground and where they might be on the ground following a ceasefire. So distances from the potential line of contact, types of troops, numbers of troops, those sort of technical details apparently were discussed. It's not clear whether there was any agreement, but at least there was some discussion on those themes. So big picture, not much progress, nowhere near a peace really, and the president has a need to put that in the best way possible, because if he seems to be saying the peace talks are useless, then that might cause him trouble politically, but it certainly would cause him trouble with Washington.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about that when you say cause trouble with Washington, because President Zelenskyy has been complaining that it's only, Ukraine that has had to make concessions, and President Trump doesn't put any pressure on Putin. Is that what you're referring to?
In part. The Ukrainians are playing a very long game. They are looking at this war in terms of years. They are looking at recovering territories. Well, Zelenskyy last week said effectively, directly, that Ukraine is perfectly willing to wait until Putin dies before they start thinking about recovering some of the lost territories. Russia has a different view on that, but that's sort of the Ukrainian take. And that is very much opposed to what the White House wants, which is a quick agreement now. And the general view in Ukraine is that the pressure is higher from the United States on Ukraine, because the calculation in the White House is that Ukraine can be bullied while Russia cannot be bullied. And they're not particularly happy about it in Ukraine, but that's their take on the situation and the power relationships. And the Ukrainian stance on that is, well, we've held out for 4 years. We probably can hold out some more. So it doesn't really point towards quick progress in talks, but that's exactly what Washington doesn't want to hear. And they certainly don't want to hear it from interlocutors. So that's why, one of the reasons why probably that Zelenskyy is trying to put as best a face as possible on the talks.
Right, so long-term time horizon from the Ukrainian side, and as you say, waiting for Putin to die. But nonetheless, Ukraine is making gains in the Zaporizhzhia region. If you talk about the battlefield itself, what can you tell us about those?
Well, they are real. They are confirmed. They are not giant gains, but they were opportunistic. They took advantage of the failure of the Starlink system within the Russian army, and also the Russians shut down the messaging system, Telegram, and that, along with apparently well-planned Ukrainian local counterattacks, enabled the Ukrainians to recapture some ground. And there is a statistic out there that in the last 2.5 years, in a few days, this was the biggest advance that the Ukrainians had made. But it should not be seen as a giant successful counteroffensive and the Russian lines about to break. It's really much more of the Ukrainians shifting to an attack mode, and where they saw opportunity, taking advantage of it. That being said, that is not the narrative that the Kremlin wants. And on the battlefield, of course, it's always bad when you're losing ground rather than gaining it.
Right. Now, that may be so. I mean, the fact that, these are minor gains at the moment, they're opportunistic, as you say. Nonetheless, they must be having a positive impact on morale in Ukraine, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. The Ukrainians are always happy to see the Russians push back, and they're always happy to see the army, which is the heart and the soul of the country. It's where everybody's greatest hopes and values and usually relatives are. And so that's the thing that they worry about the most, the state of the Ukrainian army. So when the Ukrainian military performs well and it's visible, then that gives great hope, not just to the soldiers themselves, but to the entire nation. That being said, the Ukrainians are not just fighting on the front lines. They're hitting the Russians with long-range strikes continuously. They ran a very effective series of strikes quite recently in southwest Russia, and they took out the Russian air defenses first, and then they went in and went after oil and gas, and then they went after military production facilities. And it was the work of a very mature military using the tools that it has in a really fairly intelligent, sophisticated way. This was also well reported in Ukraine. The video was there. There was commentary from the operators and the Air Force, and that also bucks people up because it's tough for a lot of people right now. So any kind of positive news from the fighting front, that helps people endure.
Indeed, but nonetheless, there does seem to be trouble at home, doesn't there? Because, we've got Valerii Zaluzhnyi saying that the counteroffensive in 2023 failed because President Zelenskyy did not provide sufficient resources for it to succeed. Clearly, this is evidence of some kind of rift or tiff, if you like, between the parties in the government. How is government unity holding out?
Well, at least from the outside, it looks very strong, and it looks quite monolithic. It appears from the outside that the Zelenskyy government has policy, it has effective people in most of the senior positions that it needs people. And when there is change needed, from the outside at least, so you listen to the government spokesman, when change is needed, then people are removed. The word from sources here is that things are not quite as happy, and that, like in any large government, there's competition, there's people pursuing careers, there are ulterior motives that sometimes are not necessarily in the national interest, and there's always a question as to how much Zelenskyy is in charge and how much he's just trying to keep the lid, if you will, on a great big bubbling pot that he really doesn't completely control. Zaluzhnyi is a part of that. General Zaluzhnyi is very popular. He is well known in Ukraine. He is an acknowledged potential rival for Zelenskyy or anybody else if and when presidential elections are taken again. And there's a great deal of speculation as to the degree to which Zelenskyy and his team take Zaluzhnyi as a serious potential rival, because Zaluzhnyi's stance is, I'm just an ambassador in Britain. I will talk honestly to the media if they ask me questions, but I certainly don't have any obvious political ambitions. People aren't really sure how much that is completely honest. And there's a war on. So, to a certain extent, these political issues can always be shoved, if you will, to the back burner because there are more pressing issues at hand. And so I think that both Zaluzhnyi and Zelenskyy, if asked, would tell you that their first priority is prosecuting the war. And probably they would be being honest in that.
Yeah, but Zaluzhnyi was asked by the Associated Press, and this is the answer he chose to give, suggesting some kind of rift within the political system. But this isn't, this, as you say, is not the time to seem divided. Why now?
Well, Associated Press asked Zaluzhnyi, and as I read the article, his essential answer was, well, it's military history. I was the general in charge. I'm going to be honest about what happened. And what he told Associated Press was not dramatically different from what had been reported here during those events, although Associated Press got it much more detail and got it straight from Zaluzhnyi. And at the time, people like me were hearing it from mid-grade officers, and sometimes those reports were contradictory. Zaluzhnyi has a long-established reputation of being a straight talker, and he at times will say he will criticize his superiors. He criticized Zelenskyy not for the offensive that he was talking about with AP, but for other things while he was running the army back in 2022 and 23. So this is not completely out of character for him. So if you ask, well, why now? It's hard to say exactly. There's very little indication that there's anything close to a presidential campaign beginning or anything close to elections happening anytime, even in the foreseeable future. So from a practical point of view, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Zaluzhnyi to make some kind of political move when there aren't going to be any elections anytime soon for him to take advantage of.
Right, so this is unlikely to be a political move. Now, in the last couple of minutes that we have left, Stefan, Starlink, the Russian side has been, or access to the Starlink satellite has been switched off for the Russian side. How much of a difference has it made in terms of attacks on Ukraine by the Russians?
If you're talking about the drone attacks, it's had some effect, but it certainly hasn't stopped them. The Starlink system is one of several communication systems that the Russians use to navigate their drones to try and hit targets inside of Ukraine. So the fact that that system is lost doesn't mean that they have no navigation system at all. And what we have seen is that the pace of the attacks, let's say over the past month, has fallen off somewhat. But it's not conclusive that was because of Starlink. It's entirely possible that the Russians had a large number of drones stocked up for a series of intense raids, and we certainly saw those raids in January and early February. Now the attacks are less intense and less frequent, and the drones themselves are less numerous. And it's hard to say how much of that reduction is because of the loss of Starlink and how much it is because the Russians maybe have run through their stocks of drones, or maybe they're amassing stocks of drones for more large strikes. We can't really say.
Understood. Stefan Korshak, thank you as always for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Thanks very much. You have a great evening.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.